What's up, guys? Welcome to Juice Podcast. My name is Salman Ali at Salman Ali NBA on Twitter. Introducing Chuck of the Chucking Darts podcast at Chucking Darts on X, I guess we're calling it. How you doing, Chuck?
I, I'm good, Salman. Thank you so much for having me back on. Yeah, Twitter to me, but
Yeah.
I'm an old person.
No, I prefer calling it Twitter too, but I'm starting to see other people call it X, so I'm just like, all right, I'll just roll with it, whatever. Um, so if you aren't familiar with Chuck, he runs a popular NBA draft podcast and Substack called Chucking Darts. The last we had you on the show was November of last year, so it's been quite a while. A lot of different things to catch up on in regards to the Rockets and their young prospects. A lot of different places we could start here, but let's do this. Um, by the time people hear this episode, the NBA draft's going to be in 3 weeks. Number one, how are you feeling?
I feel great, man. This stretch run is always exciting because people. It's just there's a closed circle of people who care about the draft all season long, and then right around this time of year, that circle gets a little bit bigger. And so it's fun. It's fun to have people more interested in my work, selfishly. But it's also just more fun to have the draft conversations that I find so interesting with like a very enthusiastic group of people that is a little bit bigger. So I feel great about it. I don't have a team allegiance. I just like watching how things unfold and trying to learn as much as I can about the league, which is, the best thing that the draft is for, in my opinion, is learning more about the NBA and about player evaluation.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I thought I had a year off this year. I was like, okay, the Rockets are gonna pick at like ninth. I don't really have to study up much on this. And then they jumped to 3, and it's like, okay, all right, I got to get going here. Crash course.
Yeah.
So much has been made about how underwhelming this class is, right? You're running a series on your podcast called "The 2024 Class Does Not Suck." Can you explain your rationale here or your general outlook for this class?
Yeah, sure. So the reason, first of all, that people say that it does suck is because there is not like what most would consider a slam dunk prospect. So in last year's class, you have the slam dunk to end all slam dunks in Wembanyama. In 2022, the year before, you have these one and done players, 3 one and done players, all like 6'10" or taller at the top, in Paolo, Chet Holmgren, and Jabari, that are all American, that are all playing in the NCAA, all had good seasons there, and so you can project stardom for one or all of them. And in 2021, though that class in retrospect is a little bit more unsettled as to who the best player is, you also had a lot of like Scotty Barnes is an American one and done, Evan Mobley American one and done, Cade Cunningham American one and done. And this year you don't really have. First of all, coming up in recruiting, you didn't have an American wing size player that everyone was going gaga over. Next year, that player is going to be Cooper Flagg, and there's going to be other guys in the 2025 draft to get excited about that people already are excited about. But Cooper Flagg is like the name right now. Like you might have heard of Cooper Flagg already. But in this class, as far as wings go, there is no one really from the United States that was a one and done that could get plugged into sort of the media hype machine that people could easily project stardom onto. So they've had to look in different places. And what might happen is that the first 2 players might be French kids, Alex Sarr and Zaccharie Risacher, and that we can have a discussion as to what their stardom might look like, whether or not they are stars. You can have that discussion about a few players in this draft, but it's more that there just isn't the traditional sort of media background with these players the same as has been in several other years. But my draft little series about why it doesn't suck is that a draft is much more than the seeming surefire guys right at the tippy top, especially in recent years. The Rockets, out of anyone, should know that really well because in each of the last 3 drafts, they've had a pick at 15 or 16 or later, and they've hit on every one in Şengün and Tari Eason and Cam Whitmore. And in each of those, I mean, Whitmore had the biggest reputation out of those 3 within his year, but no one was talking about the strength of those draft classes because of those guys in those spots. There's just the general trend is that more and more talent is flooding into the NBA because more and more kids see a very prosperous path in basketball relative to other sports. And that is only going to continue. This might be something of an off year, but I think that, first of all, players who can come in and play in the NBA, just that bar, which is a high bar, I think this class is very solid on that front. Guys who can come in and have careers and who will be very valuable considering what's happening with the salary cap and the aprons and all that stuff. You want controllable talent that can really help your team, and you want to get those bird rights to extend them. Number 2, the biases that I talked about, how it's not American one-and-done heavy at the top, that can lead to underestimation of players just because people aren't as familiar with them. And then number 3, I think one of my episodes was about wings that I thought were athletically really ready to play in the NBA, which is a little pocket in this draft that I thought was stronger than in past years. But then all those guys got a lot of NIL money, and in my opinion, the NBA hadn't caught on to them enough yet to guarantee them. So they went back to school. So the draft got a little bit thinner, in my opinion, over the last week or so, but still lots of fun little pockets to talk about.
So I actually kind of both agree and disagree with the consensus. I agree that it's a weaker class because the way I judge the draft going into it is basically how strong the top looks. When you compare this draft to the last 3 classes at the top, it's hard not to feel like there's a gap year of sorts, right? But I disagree that this is a weak class. I'm with you there. I actually don't think that. I mean, this is kind of a controversial take. I don't think weak draft classes really exist anymore. Pick any year in NBA history, and if you have a lottery pick and you're in good position to get a high impact role player at the minimum, right? If you're deliberate about it, if not an all-star, right? And you want to hear another crazy stat, every draft class in NBA history has produced an all-star, right? So this one will too, every single one of them. And really, when you narrow it down to the 21st century, you're getting at least 3 all-stars in the weaker end of the spectrum, right? So I think the problem with weaker classes is that it gets tougher to identify who those stars are going to be. 2013 was Giannis, Gobert, and Oladipo. Only one of those guys was a lottery talent, right? Considering how different everyone's big board looks, I kind of think this is going to be one of those years, like a 2013 kind of year. But now that I kind of gave you that kind of context about how stars kind of filter into these drafts, if you were to pick 3 guys, right? Because odds are there are going to be 3 stars. Who do you think the 3 are going to be?
Well, my number 1 player is Ron Holland, so I would pick him. After that, it's still a little fuzzy as to how exactly I would order it, but I think very highly of Donovan Clingan. And I think very highly of, frankly, I think pretty highly of Zach Edey as well. Now, that's a lot of that, again, that sparks a conversation about where the league's going, what the league values, who's going to be able to play high minutes in the league. But something that all 3 of those guys share is that they possess pretty extreme physical advantages relative to who their peers will be in the NBA at their position. I can get more into that, but I don't want to go off on another tangent if you want to react to those 3 names.
Well, I mean, so let's put Edey off to the side for a second because I feel like there's a lot of meat on that bone, right?
There is.
Yeah. like this is to me, this is the kind of draft you want to maximize as much certainty as possible because of like all these top picks have higher than normal bust potential. And I'm usually someone who thinks these teams should take more swings in these drafts. In a class like this, those swings scare me. Those swings can get you fired, right? Like I would stay away from swings this year. And it's against by nature, but two players right off the bat that present the most certainty are one of them you listed, Shephard and Donovan Clingan. Like there seems to be like this resistance when you mention those guys as like no brainer, top 5 picks, if not top 3. Like the tide has started to change a little bit these past couple of weeks. But why do you think it's taken so long for folks to come around to Shepherd and Clingan specifically?
I don't know that it's taken that long for them. I mean, Klingan was a top 10 pick preseason. I mean, he was listed that high. And so, right. I mean, and then he had his great season. They won the national title, and I think he like naturally kind of moved up. So I don't really know that he's behind the 8 ball. And I think Shepherd, I think from what I've heard from whatever little whispers I've heard from a tertiary source into what scouts think of him, there is a question about his overall athleticism at guard in the NBA because, people call center a replaceable position. You can always get some center and da-da-da-da-da, and that's its own conversation. But just going by the height scale, guys read Shepherd's size, number one, have trouble really setting themselves apart in the NBA. And number two, there is more competition at guys who are 6'1" to 6'5" than there are guys 6'5" to 6'9", than there are 6'9" to 7 foot, than there are 7 foot plus. I mean, that's just humanity. So for Reed to be a consensus top 5 pick means that you have to believe very, 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 very strongly in his skill base, because athletically, I think that the concerns about him are somewhat valid. Like he has real athletic limitations. He has stuff that he does very well, but he is not going to walk in and be, a top, 7. Like he's not going to be in the 70th percentile of NBA guard athletes. He's just not. So if you want to believe in him, that's okay, but you need to believe very strongly in his skill package. It has to be extremely special. And the thing about Reed is that his statistical output is extremely special. So as long as you want to buy that is going to scale up really importantly, then he should be a top 5 pick. I have him on any given day. I have him anywhere from 4th, 3 to 8. So I go back and forth, but I've had him around there for a few months now. That's where I've sort of seen him. And, it just depends on when you catch me. I'll settle on it probably in about a week or so where I truly am going to put my stamp on him, but he's in that range for me.
Yeah, I'm in kind of scary territory with him. I have him second.
I got it.
I just think he's like there's a lot of certainty there. There's someone who puts up the numbers that he did, and was as active defensively as he was. To me, it's hard not to believe that's not going to scale up, right? And this brings me to my, we left off on Edey. Chuck, do you remember the Julius Randle draft?
14, yeah. That was a highly regarded draft at the time, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think Randall was taken 6th or 7th overall by the Lakers.
7th, yeah.
Yeah. There was so much consternation about it at the time. Going into it, there were so many questions about Randall, right? About how this kind of player is not going to work in this modern NBA. X kind of player. I don't get why we still do this. Every year, a player like this comes along, right? That just produces crazy at a crazy level in college. Comes in the NBA and replicates it, right? Maybe not to a T, but is successful and has a long career, right? Mm-hmm. And for some reason, we do this stupid thing where we're like, oh, this doesn't hold on. If you're a good basketball player at college, you're going to be a good basketball player in the NBA. If you're really, really good, chances are like obviously it's not like there. You have to factor in age, you have to factor in like size, right? Like that's maybe what's different, but that's not a factor here, right? Like Edey is
For
like
Edey, you mean? Yeah.
yeah, like Edey is like maybe 1 or 2 years older than your average draft pick, and he's got the size, right? Like that's not a question here. I don't get why why are we overthinking this? Is my question.
Edey, yeah, well, there's obviously a case against it. It's that he plays a style of basketball that the NBA has been going away from for a very long time. I mean, that's why he posts up. He posts up all the time. His entire offense was built around getting him a good entry pass in the post, and his offense revolved around him for that. And no offense revolves around that kind of a post player. Nikola Jokic is incredible in the post. Joel Embiid is very, very, very good in the post. But each one of them faces up and operates further away from the hoop. They are both 3-level scoring threats. And Edey's not a 3-level scoring threat. He has shooting touch, which suggests
Embiid wasn't always like that. Like it took Embiid to a while to get there.
Correct. That's true. It took Embiid a while to get there, but Embiid also, like, in terms of his grace and his balance on his feet, like, he always was exceptional for his size. Edey is more of a sledgehammer. He's he doesn't necessarily have bad feet, but he does not, like, you could sit courtside and watch Embiid and it would look almost like a ballet dancer. Like, just so perfect in his footwork and his movements when he was trying to score. And with Edey, it's like, boom, boom, boom is my jump hook there.
DeMarcus Cousins, kind of, yeah.
A little bit. I think, but the point being that most every really great player in the NBA is a dominant offensive player, but they also, you can revolve an offense around them to where they're constantly finding teammates and reading the defense. Some people do it better than others. Luka Doncic reads defenses better than Jason Tatum. But Tatum still forces help. He understands where his passes are going to be, and you can, revolve a slightly more diversified offense around Tatum, but you can revolve an offense around both. With Edey, the question about him is you have people who just see the sort of defensive tape and how he doesn't really challenge lobs, and they just say, well, opposing NBA offenses are really going to be able to go at him, and he's only ever going to be a part-time player and things like that. My feeling about that is that not many people are accustomed to playing post defense. No one's accustomed to playing post defense against a player of Edey's size, and so teams are going to have to send help when he is on the floor, when he's on offense and he has the ball. Guarding him one-on-one in the post is going to be such a tough challenge, even for NBA big men, that other teams are going to have to send help. Once they do, he will have passes to make. But again, he's never going to be Doncic or Jokic where he's seeing everything 3 passes ahead, because that hasn't been his game at Purdue. He instead will make like the simple correct pass. I don't know if I'm really comparing him now to Tatum in my Tatum-Doncic analogy, but I think he would be part of a more diversified offense where he is always a good option because he's always going to draw help. And he will kick the ball out to like a good option. He's not going to be manipulating 3 defenders at once with his eyes and everything. But he's going to make the right play and always remain a good offensive option himself. And defensively, I think that he has a bit more utility than is being given credit for. And then that's the real difference. If you think that he's a backup center, then you wouldn't draft him before 15th. If you think that he is a starting center who can really hang on the floor, then he should go probably in the top 10. And I just think he is a starting center who will be able to hang on the floor, and that he has potential to be better than that.
Yeah, like my thing with this stuff is like on drafting in the modern NBA overall, 2 thoughts. One, it's bullshit, right? Because in 6 or 7 years, it's not going to be the modern NBA anymore. The league's going to change by the time that player is actually relevant, right, in his prime. Like, so trying to forecast that is, I think, is a fruitless activity, right? Like you're gonna lose, right? Like it's not gonna work out most of the
Well,
time.
I'm gonna keep trying, Salman. That's a big
Okay.
part of what I try to do. So
Okay.
go ahead, go ahead.
And the other thing is like trying to draft for archetype,
Yeah.
right? Is how you or like trying to draft against archetype, right? Because like you see this more with the drafting against certain players. Is how you miss out on like the really top guys, right? Like Alperen Şengün was a guy that was drafted. People missed out on because they thought of the NBA some way and they thought he couldn't work in that way,
Right.
right? Like when
Yes.
you think of the NBA in such a modern frame, like narrow framework, like it's just not like you're gonna miss out sometimes. And I feel like the Edey's one where it's like I don't have to overthink it. I know he's gonna be good, and like this is one of those drafts where it's like if I know he's gonna be good, I just want to take him, right? I just want to take him because this is the kind of draft where the guy that's next up on my board, I'm not sure if he's gonna be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
Um.
think like so. I agree with that up to a point where you need to, if you're building a team, you have to understand what your timeline is, number one, because it means that you're in charge of the team and you don't want to get fired. That is a real consideration and should be. Like, we can't, you do have to have a plan for when you are going to compete. I think that with the way that I look at that sort of question is you take the best player available as long as that player you believe is going to be so good that you're eventually going to be building around that player. But if you don't think the player is going to be that good and you think they are going to supplement your stars, then you need to draft a little bit more for fit. That's when fit enters the equation. For some teams, that happens at pick number 5. For other teams, they might think there's more stars than that, and it happens at pick number 8. But if you don't feel as though there's a player that can displace one of your tent poles on your team, then you have to draft someone that you think has the potential to accentuate your foundation, not replace it. That's the only caveat I put.
Fair. Now let's go the other way on this.
Okay.
Can you sell me on two guys I keep seeing mocked in the top 6? Zaccharie, Risacher, and Mates Buzelis. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their names right, but so let me start by saying this. I think Risacher is good. I think he deserves to go in the lottery. But man, if you're gonna take a wing in the top 3, he better have a stronger handle than this. Like I was not the biggest fan of what I saw on the Ignite tape, and frankly, I have Buzelis outside the lottery. Like I think he's a wing who can't shoot, right? Like that's a big red flag to me. I don't understand why these two are like so unanimously mocked in the top 6 as consistently as they are. I may be outside the consensus on this. Is it just that they're wings? Is it are we doing the archetype thing that hard this year? Like what's going on?
Yeah, I think the wings part of it, I mean, that's a big part of it, but they're different kinds of wings. I mean, they really are different from one another. Risacher is the archetype because Risacher is the better like lateral athlete. Like he can guard point guards, 2s, 3s, maybe some 4s. And so that defensive versatility is why wings are valuable, is because you can play them in all these different kinds of lineups. You won't have to take them off the floor as long as they're, offensively viable. And with Risacher, the handle concerns, I think, to me, it's more of a lack of creativity than it is like an outright bad handle. Doesn't have a very creative handle, but like neither did Jaylen Brown when Jaylen Brown came into the NBA. He still gets crap for not having a left hand. Paul George didn't have much of a handle when he came into the NBA. So like what happens, and neither did Jabari Smith for that matter, by the way. But I love Jabari, still do. The thing about NBA space is that it tends to help wings who have developing handles because Risacher, for example, plays in a pro league overseas where, they have bigs who are in their mid-20s or older who are anchoring the paint, and it is literally harder to finish there because no team probably has enough 5-out shooting to really stress opposing defenses to where the paint gets cleared. In the NBA, the paint is cleared constantly because it's the best offensive league in the world. So many teams have lineups where 5 guys can shoot, and all of a sudden, a guy like Risacher has more space to operate when he's attacking a closeout. He can take 2 dribbles and not worry about it getting dug at as necessarily quite as aggressively, because the defense is respecting so many other options. Now, the flip side of that is that people have more length in the NBA, so they can cover ground more quickly on defense. Like, it's not a perfect 1-to-1, but I do think that Risacher's handle will get a little bit better as long as he carves out a space on the floor. I think it is going to be easier for him to do that a little bit than Buzelis. Buzelis is not the athlete that Risacher is. He is more creative than Risacher. He has a pretty creative handle when it comes to driving and driving to score. He has a good last step. Like, he gets up and dunks a lot easier than you think that he would, being like a skinny white kid, frankly. And
great finisher. Yeah.
Very good finisher. And when even in this G League season, if something was going on really like 18 feet and in on offense or defense, he was very, very good. He could get to his shot, which has like a really nice high release, in a variety of ways, and no one could really contest it. And I thought he had pretty good touch on those kinds of shots. And on defense, if you bumped into him, like, you might be able to create a little bit of space, but he had very good recovery with his length. He has great timing on his hands for deflections, and he can contest shots late. So the question with him is whether or not he can stretch his game out to 3 and how many different positions he can guard on defense. I think I'm a little bit lower on his defensive projection out in space. Like, I think basically Montes is going to have to play a lot of 4 and maybe some small 5 in the NBA. I think he's going to be the low man helping weak side a lot. I don't want him like fighting over screens and trailing. I don't really want him in ISO on switches. He might be able to survive against some players doing that, but I don't like his chances more often than not. However, I think it might mean that he is a sort of spot starter where he closes some games in some matchups and doesn't close in other matchups. But I think he is an NBA player. Like, I don't really see Matas having much bust potential, nor do I see Risacher having much bust potential. And if you view it from that perspective, if you say neither of these guys are going to bust and they're wings and they're young, then you would say, yeah, that they probably belong in the top 8 or something. I mean, there is a little bit of safety in that. Do you think either one of them has the chance to outright, like, they are not playing in the NBA in 3 or 4 years?
I'm lower on Matas, but I'm not sure if I would say go that far on it. I think he's gonna be a productive NBA player, but I just think there are better guys in front of him. Like that's like there are more proven guys in front of him. Like, especially with the Ignite program, like if you're gonna draft if you're gonna draft one of those guys in the top 5, you got to really lean on your scouting, right? Like on your you see something in the tape that makes them special that other guys aren't seeing, right? Because Utah, like, I mean, it was a tough watch for me. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was not a coherent basketball team, and it's not just that, like, okay, they were playing losing basketball. It's like I didn't see someone have a high degree of impact at least being like a bulwark against like some truly terrible losers, right? Like no one was really doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team full of really young kids who've never like played anything approaching this level of defense before, just because like they've never played offensive opposition as good as you're going to play in the G League, which still has like a ton of talent that used to play in college and like really knows how to score. Trying to defend against that when all of you are young, except for some like really sort of retread journeyman types. Like everything is faster. Communication needs to be quicker. Footwork needs to be precise. Hand placement has to be precise. You know, and there's just lots of breakdowns in communication. So like their problems to me, there were problems on both sides of the ball, but with Holland, for example, who's my favorite player in the class, he was never a point forward really as a youth player, not to this degree where he had like 30% usage. And so you put all that decision making in an 18-year-old's hands against guys on across the court from him who may have gotten cups of coffee in the NBA or have been all Americans or all conference players. Like, he's going to make mistakes. That's what's going to happen. The challenge, I guess, or the task in scouting them is kind of the same whenever you scout anyone, is say what traits do we see here? What is the capacity for improvement? What is he going to be able to rely on at the next level? Where is the modern game going, and how much will that modern game value what he does? And like with Ron, I think the answer is pretty emphatic positively in a lot of areas. With Matas, I think there is a place for him, certainly, but I think it's a little, like, I'm a little bit more comfortable passing on Matas because I feel like his team fit is going to need to be like just right. I think he's a guy who could bounce around from team to team a little bit depending on where he goes.
I think there needs to be more skill development here with Matas. Specifically, I mean, obviously, like some awareness he'll gain just throughout the course of playing. But I mean, I think if you're drafting him to be like a special, like maybe not the same level of special wing that Risacher is, but at least a complementary wing. If you're drafting him to be like that kind of
Yeah.
guy, there needs to be some more work here. And you're in that respect, I do agree. He may bounce around.
I think the biggest area that he needs help. I don't worry about his shot as much as you do. He wasn't like a great shooter as a youth prospect, but he was okay. Had 1 year where he was like legit good. And it's always hard to adjust to the NBA line when you don't have sort of the college line to get used to for a couple years. But his assist to turnover ratio was like really bad. And when he, like I said, he has a creative handle to create looks for himself to score. But he does not, to me, take advantage of like pass. I think he gets tunnel vision a lot. And for a supporting player, that's not good. You don't want to have, like, if you're trying to make other stars better, tunnel vision is one of the worst things you can have. Because if you have tunnel vision, then it doesn't really matter that much who your teammates are. You are looking to score yourself. So I don't think it's like a hopeless thing with him, but I think he needs to work on it a lot. You see flashes, especially in transition, of some better vision from him, but that needs to translate to the half court and quickly in order for him to be able to lock down NBA minutes.
In regard to the Rockets at number 3, so I see a lot of conversation about how, the Rockets have X, Y, and Z players. They need to go draft X, Y, and Z players, right? It's like, okay, so like, I get the instinct, right, to go for fit. I get it, but the reality is the Rockets have like almost a player at every positional category, right? They have players at guards, they have players at forwards, they have players at big, right?
Yeah.
That
Yep.
I'm not really sure if drafting for fit is really going to do you anything, and also because it's going to be hard for that player to play either way.
Right.
There's going to be a logjam in front of him, right? And I think I go back to what I said at the beginning of the episode. I think you want to minimize the failure, right? You were just given this by Brooklyn, right? Like this is a gift, just it's a layup, right? Go take someone that's a layup of a pick, right? Go take someone like that is, I don't want to say failure proof, but like very unlikely to fail, right? Like I go back to at number 3, right? You're in the Clingan territory, you're in the Shepherd territory, and you're in the Topic territory. Who I like Topic actually. I see some of the Dragic comparisons. Maybe I don't necessarily see the same level of like ups, like guaranteed that he'll ever reach that. Like, but I do see like the similarities there. Like I watched Dragic up close when he was in Houston early on in his career. Like I'm very familiar with his game. So I like Topic a lot. And to me, when I look at those 3 guys, I'm like, they're all gonna struggle to get on the floor. but they're not going to struggle to be good NBA players once they get there.
Yeah, I think Topic would be a solid. I did a mock draft where I picked Topic for Houston right after the lottery. I think that would be fine. And if you're looking at where, I mean, you want to make sure his knee's good because he's had a knee injury, seemingly for the last 6 months. But provided that is out of the way, yeah, I mean, Topic is, for example, like a lot bigger than Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham, and has played. He had more usage than either of those guys because both those guys came off the bench. Now we can knock Kentucky for doing that. It's not the first time Kentucky has misused, lottery talent. But Topic was the guy. He's used to being an offensive engine. He's used to driving downhill and actually getting to the hoop all the time, which is not something that Sheppard did. I think that his free throw numbers indicate that he's going to be able to shoot, in my opinion. And
I'm optimistic, too.
And so when you look at what the Rockets, I don't want to say need or whatever, but like the players that they have at every position, I would say most of them tend to have not proven themselves as high volume 3-point threats. I mean, that is sort of the case. Tari has not proven himself as that. I love Tari. I love Tari. Jabari, it comes and goes depending on whether or not he's playing with Fred VanVleet. Şengün, for as good as he is not like demonstrated himself as like a 3-level guy quite yet. He takes him occasionally. Jalen Green, the same question of consistency. Amen is not really that much of a shooter. Whitmore might be, could be. He also has his own tunnel vision to deal with, but since there isn't and VanVleet's there, but VanVleet's there for another year, and then if the team exercises its option, and if then VanVleet goes, you wonder, well, who's the guard on this team that can consistently like get their own shot from 3 and knock it down and make sure our offense is top half of the league. And so to me, if you're at 3, you can see if you think Topic is that guy, you can see if you think Sheppard's that guy. But you want to take someone who I think you maybe have an eye potentially towards taking over the reins from VanVleet, playing alongside Amen, something like that. Or if you really want to go best player available and say screw it, and you want to take one of those gigantic bigs, like Edey you could trade down and get. But if you wanted to take Clingan and really go in on that, that's okay, but you have to understand that you're not signing up at the number 3 pick for 30 minutes a night. You're signing up at the number 3 pick but for like 18 to 25 minutes a night depending on matchup. And who knows? If you are going to sign Şengün to a max contract,
maybe not even that if you're getting Adams back next year, right? Steven Adams coming back healthy.
Right, although I think they'll have him for a little while, but his salary is also a tradable salary, but like if Clingan and Şengün can't play together, and I doubt they can, then why would you spend the number 3 pick on someone who can't play with Şengün? Like you really should do that. And that was what I mean by like you kind of do need to draft for fit. Unless you think that one of these guys can displace Şengün and you want that future for your team. Like fit does have to matter a little bit.
But I mean, there are other players that I could say, like, do I think Sheppard's going to displace, like, Whitmore, Green, or, Well,
that's one of his appeals, is that he doesn't, you don't have to ask that question with him, like, by and large. And that's the appeal of drafting shooting, is that shooting tends to be able to, if it does end up displacing, then that's gravy, but it tends to be able to play around other talent. That's why it's so attractive.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. For me, it's like failure proof, and like I feel like most general managers in the league understand that Houston took the guy that probably, like, if Houston ends up taking Clingan, like, it's much better on a trade perspective, from a trade perspective, if they end up taking like Buzelis, right? Like teams may end up wanting to get Clingan from you, whereas Buzelis, it's like,
well, I mean,
there's gonna be
y'all are already like talking about trying to acquire Mikal Bridges, right? Or that's in the air.
That was gonna be the next. Yeah, that was gonna.
Sorry,
So
I don't mean to step on it. I just mean like if you're trying to draft, thinking about who might be an attractive trade chip down the road. In the Rockets' particular circumstance, I would question that strategy because in order to build up trade value in a player, they need to play. And if you think you're so deep right now that all these guys are going to struggle to lock down consistent minutes, then none of their trade values are going to be that attractive in 2 or 3 years, which is why I think it is smart that they are considering the trade now, because a draft pick, lots of times, the peak of its trade value is like right now, in like the 3 weeks before the draft actually happens when people are falling in love. So that's why I think it is good that the Rockets are investigating the trade right now.
Yeah, I mean, I question this idea that GMs aren't smart enough to realize that a guy is playing in a logjam, right? Like a guy's too talented to be a backup center, but he is a backup center, right? I think these GMs are smarter than that, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Like I just like there are guys in the league. I'm like that guy is not the only reason he's not playing is because X, Y, or Z is playing in front of them, right? And it's so obvious that I can't imagine that other general managers don't see the same
I
thing,
don't know.
right?
Isaiah Hartenstein bounced around, you know. Halliburton was traded
Yeah.
from Sacramento to Indiana. Like I don't know. If you're saying that you think that teams will recognize that Clingan is this incredible talent, even though he's not playing major minutes, maybe that's true. But the Rockets better be a top 5 seed. If they're not a top 5, if they're the 9 seed and he's not playing that much for a 9 seed, there might be GMs that like him and would trade for him, but they'll probably lowball you. They'll say, okay, or
But is Shepherd gonna play major minutes next year? Like I don't see that either.
I don't know. I can't really maybe not, but and again, that's why if you're thinking towards trading the pick, trading it now has a lot of attraction, especially that the Rockets want to like take a step up and probably be a top 6 seed next year, play in at minimum, but they probably have an eye towards the top 6. And it's hard to rely on any rookie to elevate you to that, especially, well, I won't say especially, but it's hard for any rookie to elevate you into that. It's probably better spent on bringing Mikal Bridges in, or something like that.
Well, let's talk about Mikal Bridges because like I had this on the rundown. I mean, to me, if Brooklyn comes to you and asks you for number 3, and all you have to give up is the pick and salary filler, it's a no-brainer to me, right? And I kind of think Brooklyn should consider that too, right? Like, because what are they gonna get that's better than the number 3 overall pick from Mikal Bridges? Do they think there's a multi-pick trade out there that's gonna equal the number 3 overall pick in like some value? I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. If you remember last year, Portland had this flirtation with trading the number 3 pick, either for Bridges or like Brandon Ingram. This was before they traded Dame, and they're trying to like pick. They had to pick a lane. They eventually picked Scoot, and that obviously meant that they were going to trade Dame. So
Yeah.
in
I think there was some Zion talk too, right?
maybe
Like
yeah,
number 2 for
yeah,
Zion.
that's right, yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. So there's the thing with Brooklyn is that I don't think they feel like they need to pick a lane. They could keep Mikal and still be bad enough next year to get a top pick, and then you'd have Mikal to pair with your top pick. I don't know when Mikal's contract is up.
They don't have their top pick next year. The Rockets do.
Unprotected? Or is it like pick swap or whatever?
Yeah, I mean it's the pick outright.
And it's not protected for any 1 to whatever.
No, I'm sorry. It's the swap. It's a swap. But yeah, it's unprotected.
Okay. So, God, poor Nets. Okay. So they don't have they can't say okay we can tank or whatever. But if Bridges is not agitating to leave, and I don't know when his contract is up, but if he's not agitating to leave, then Brooklyn could still say, look, we're actually incentivized to be as good as we can be next year. Otherwise, we're going to lose our pick to the Rockets. So why would we make it so much easier for the Rockets to get this incredible asset next year from us? They're going to get our pick next year. Why make it If I trade Mikal and I draft Reed Shepherd third, the Nets are going to lose 55 games. So why do that? Why not try to be as competitive as you possibly can? And since Mikal plays every game, then I could see the Nets saying, well, let's just have him play every game and try to put a good team around him. That's not saying that that's easy, but like there is a train of thought there as opposed to selling right now. Like NBA teams tend not to sell good players until like they feel like they have to. And the only exception to that is if you overwhelm them, make it so that they couldn't possibly say no. And the Nets know that the Rockets have a lot more to offer than just the number 3 pick. So they would probably ask for a lot more than just the number 3 pick and see if they get bowled over.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, like, isn't the right move to think of next year's pick as a sunk cost? Because how does the Rockets getting a bad pick next year instead of a good pick help them? Right? Like why even think of it in that way?
Why think of it in that way? Well, because if nothing else, you could think of it as extra leverage in trade negotiations. If both sides know that if this trade goes down, not only are the Rockets getting Mikal Bridges, but they are most likely getting a better pick in next year's draft. And you can bake that into the cake of negotiations and say, well, this is going to be such an advantage to you that you guys got to pay us more. I mean, it's just all part of the negotiation. It's like with the Nets, it's either keep Mikal Bridges, and we have a lot of paths that our team could take with Mikal Bridges on it, or trade him now. But if we're going to trade him before we really have to, you need to really make it worth our while. And that's the way they'd go about it.
Can we do an exercise?
Sure.
Can you be Brooklyn and I'll be Houston?
Okay.
Okay, so I'll say, let's just start at the baseline. Number 3 pick, salary filler, Mikal Bridges. Yes or no?
No.
No? Okay. What if I...
Do you want me to counter? I don't want you to negotiate against yourself. Can I give you a counter of something I'd accept, and then you can say yes or no?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm trading Mikal, huh? I want the number 3 pick. I want... you to relinquish swap rights next year. And in addition to your salary filler, I would like... I'm trying to think of who's on Brooklyn. I would like Jabari Smith. Then you can...
Okay, so I'll counteroffer.
Okay.
Right? So I'll say the number 3 pick, salary filler. I'm not giving up Jabari. Okay. But what I will do is I'll amend next year to an unprotected pick to a top 3 protection. So if you guys are truly dog next year, you get to keep the pick.
No. Well, I'm not doing this unless the swap is completely undone, and I would like one of your guys. You guys can't pay them all anyway. Jabari's going to be extension eligible after this year. Y'all going to extend him, or is this guy going to be an RFA in a couple years as is? I could play the waiting game and let the Rockets run into this financial iceberg that they're going to hit, and then I could pick the bones then. So if you want him, then you need to give me one of your guys. Make a decision on one of these 6 incredible players that you have. And if you'd rather give up Whitmore and make that pick unprotected next year and give me 3, then I'll do that. And we can do that.
I'll give one more last counter offer before I walk away.
Okay.
I'll give you your pick back for next year. I'll give you number 3, but you got to give me Phoenix's for next year.
I have Phoenix's pick for next year. Okay. So you would get Phoenix's first. We would get our crappy pick back. I'd get the number 3 this year. When you say salary filler, what's the salary we're talking about? What's your sheet look like?
Jayshawn Tate, I'm sorry, hold on.
Jayshawn's fine.
I gotta think of it.
This is when you're really tempting me because I just love everyone on the Rockets. Jayshawn and who?
Okay, let me look this up.
I can tell you, I will do that trade if I get Whitmore too. You can have the first from Phoenix, but I would like Cam Whitmore.
I'd walk away. Yeah, okay. I mean, like, listen, I like Bridges. I don't love Bridges like. And I like Whitmore better.
And I can replace Whitmore with Tari. stress fracture Tari. So you can give me Tari, I'll give you Phoenix's first. We can relinquish the swap next year, and I can get number 3, and you can have Mikal.
It's closer. I'd probably end up declining.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't give you the swap back. Like I'd give you the swap, or I'd give you the player.
I understand.
Right?
I think you're entirely justified in doing that. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
But another thing
like,
I'm betting on as Brooklyn is like you're in the West, and you guys want to be better next year, and I think you could be, but the competition is so brutal. One injury to one of your guys, or maybe like the Grizzlies come back with a vengeance. I'll bet on the Rockets going for it and still being in 10th in December, and then you can come back to the bargaining table for Mikal, and I'll still get myself a very good deal. That's more like, that's why I feel like I don't need to make a move. The Rockets are the one that are on the more urgent timeline, so that's why you have to overwhelm me. That's what I mean.
I mean, the Rockets are the one holding the picks. Like it's not.
I hold Mikal. I mean, you can play that either way.
Mikal is not. This is not Kevin Durant. Like, what are we talking about?
I'm asking for
player.
1 pick and 1 swap and 1 player. Mikal.
You're asking for 2 picks. You're asking for your pick back next year, and you're asking for the number 3 this year.
Yeah, 1 pick, 1 swap, 1 player, and I'm giving you Phoenix's pick. Come on now, man. But this is a good faith negotiation. I'm just saying.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like, I think Raphael Stone's done a great job. You know, I love Houston, and I love everybody there. If I had someone that I thought other teams were interested in, and I was on a longer timeline, Houston would be the first call I would make because I love everybody there. But you're in the West. It's very hard to elevate in the West. Is Şengün going to be an All-NBA player next year? If he's not, then you're probably looking at a play-in seed at best. And if that's the case, then you're going to come back to the bargaining table. I will bet on you coming back to me with a better offer. And that's why you need to overwhelm me if you want it right now.
I just tend to believe that Houston's not in any sort of desperate move. Like I really don't think they're they may want to make the play-in tournament next year, and I think they actually have a decent chance of doing that with just like adding a mid-level exception guy, which is going to be really significant this summer. It's like $12 million or something.
Sure.
Adding that to the core, take whatever draft pick you have, send him off to the Vipers because he's not going to play anyways, and just running it back. Like, because I think that you're going to get an actual leap for Alperen Şengün this year. Like, I really do believe that. Like, an actual leap. Not this leap that we saw this year that people called it a leap, gave him the most improved play, like, put him in the most improved player.
We talked about it in November. You and I talked about it.
Yeah, he didn't leap, man. He was just good. Right? He got playing time and opportunity. Okay. I think he'll get an actual leap this year from Alperen Şengün. And Jalen Green, I think if he's going to make one, this is the one. This is the year, right? The 4th year, right before restricted free agency. There's a lot of pressure on him.
I mean, he better. Yeah.
Yeah, the Rockets, I'd say he has until February to show some serious progress. Otherwise, I'd seriously explore trades with Jalen.
Well,
right?
Yeah, but again, that's you are not going to trade him until you feel the need to trade him. That's the thing. But was the offering him for Mikal, did that actually happen? Do you have any intel as to whether or not that was actually offered?
I don't know. I suspect not, just because I know how high the Rockets organization was on Jalen when they first took him, and they still appear to be pretty high on him. I don't know if they would have given him up for Mikal Bridges, but if they did, I mean, it does give me some optimism that they're at least being realistic about Jalen, right? And then not that Mikal Bridges that's a good offer, right? But that they're in the ballpark of like reality. Yeah, right? We're not talking he's going to be the next Kobe Bryant anymore, right? Like that's not. I mean, not to say they were ever thinking that, but like we're not in that sphere, if that's the case. If they're talking about him in Mikal Bridges discussions. Yeah, I think, listen, this is going to be an interesting draft for the Rockets. This pick is kind of like a luxury, right? Like they really don't like Cam and this pick. Like they really should not have this. Right? Like they really should. Like I don't know why they have Cam Whitmore. Every day I look at the roster, I'm like, why is he here?
Yeah.
He doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
This makes no sense, right? Like it's the ultimate like luxury that he's on the roster, and it gives them so much optionality, not only in trades but in building out the team. Because Whitmore, I think Whitmore has higher upside than some guys on the roster that the general public is higher on.
Really?
Right? I don't want
to. You don't want to go public with your opinion, but you think he does.
Yeah, it's behind a paywall, so that's why I don't want to go public.
Nice,
right?
nice.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, let's talk about that then. We've had a season to evaluate the talent. It's interesting because I feel like I wrote a column for Initiatives.com, or rank the core 6 Rockets, and my conclusion from the article ends up being basically, boy, these Rockets drafted 6 awesome draft prospects during the rebuild, and B, a pecking order is starting to emerge, and it may not be the one that the organization or fans were expecting, or they're ready for.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about that?
About a pecking order emerging, I still look,
or just like your overall thoughts from watching the prospects this season.
I think it's very difficult. Şengün's the best player right now. We can probably all agree that he is the best player right now. But there is a question as to where, if at all, he caps a team's ceiling. You may think that he doesn't. You may think that you can build a top 5 offense around him and like a top 15 to 20 defense. I mean, they're already 13th in defense, and he played a lot this year, though their defense was also good when he was out. So if you believe that top 5 offense and top 15 to 20 defense is on the table, then that is usually like a title contender, usually, or at least in the discussion if it's that good. If you believe that, then he's the number 1 player now, and he's the number 1 player moving forward. If you believe that the ceiling is somewhat lower than that, then even though he's the best player right now, you may not rank him as your best overall possible asset internally. Externally, you'd say, he's going to be an MVP. But internally, maybe not. I think that out of everyone that you drafted, so it's Jabari, Şengün, Jalen, Amen, Tari, and Whitmore, right? I would say that it is unlikely. I mean, this will be the last season to find out about Jalen. But if you think it's unlikely that Jalen is a real top 2 offensive option, then the only one that really projects to be that kind of cornerstone of a great offensive team is Şengün. I don't know that Jabari projects as a top 2 offensive option. Really important player. Could be on a great offense. But in terms of a tent pole, which is that's why you're in the draft. That's what a rebuild is for, is to find tent poles. You could make the argument that really the only one in that mold is Şengün. Whitmore, not the playmaker. He might be able to average 20 a game one day or something like that. Or maybe if you're really optimistic, you could see him in sort of a Jaylen Brown, on like a Jaylen Brown kind of trajectory. But unless you're that optimistic on him, I kind of think you need a bit more playmaking. Amen has the playmaking, but you wonder about the jumper. So, gosh, I would say that in terms of the scarcity of talent, which is another way to default to stuff like this, in terms of the scarcity of the talent, I'd probably go Amen number 1. He is the scarcest kind of talent. Şengün number 2. Jabari number 3. Whitmore number 4. Tari number 5, and maybe Jalen 6. Although I don't know, that sounds stupid. Probably Jalen 4, Whitmore 5, Tari 6.
Don't fight it. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you just had, don't fight it.
No, I don't.
If you're worried about what people think about what your opinion is, like I'm telling you right now, people are gonna like clown you no matter what. With Rockets Twitter, there are camps everywhere. You're gonna offend somebody.
I'm not worried about offending anyone. Like it's second guessing myself. Like, does it really make sense to put Jalen Green 6? But when I think about scarcity of talent, it's just because there's always going to be athletic twos who are like offensively tilted. It's either you're really efficient at it and you're a star, or you're not efficient at it and you're a six man and kind of a replaceable six man. I mean, that's really what we're dealing with. And the information would suggest that he's not quite going to be efficient enough. So, I mean, I would still probably rank him ahead of Tari. And I would, like, Whitmore has medicals, who knows, I don't know. So, but, like, I love Tari. That's the thing. I think Tari is, like, the so that's why I would still want him in this trade. If I'm ranking him 1 to 6 and he comes up 6, trade him to me, please. If you think you can spare him, give him to me. But yeah, I would probably, whatever I had, Amen, Şengün, Jabari, and then Whitmore, Jalen, Tari. Say, I don't know, if you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, like I wasn't really asking you to like rank them, but I was just I'm glad that you did. I'm like it's nice to hear someone else's perspective on this. You said a lot there. Like let's start with what you said about Şengün, right? Obviously I've been very high on the guy. Like this has been kind of like, in addition to being a Rockets podcast, it's also been like a Şengün propaganda network.
Yeah, sure.
Lately. But like I feel like when I talk about him, like in relation to like the upper echelon guys in his mold, right? I've been relatively conservative about like not going too far with it, right? Like for some reason, the discussion around Şengün has been binary. It's been Sabonis or Jokic, right? And this year I've been kind of bringing up the possibility, like, what if it's not either? Can we explore that middle ground a little bit? Like, what about Pau Gasol? Like, what about Pau Gasol? Right? Like, Pau Gasol was a first or second team All NBA big. Maybe wasn't an MVP caliber player, but was like right underneath that tier of players. Right, when at the peak of his powers, Pau Gasol was that good.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we just don't bring him up. Maybe because he's not top of mind anymore because he's retired. Maybe because like you know, people just don't remember how Pau Gasol played. But like I think there's a middle ground. Like there's a universe where he's not Sabonis or Jokic and still better than one might think he is, right? Like I think I'm willing to explore that more with Shingo this year.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think so. But like again, you just have to do sort of the brutal. How good could the Rockets' offense be with Şengün operating at star usage? That's the question. If you think it can be a top 5 offense, then there's like all this melts away. Sabonis, Jokic, like who cares? You have a top 5 offense. I think he's already a better defender than Sabonis ever has been. So, you know, there you go. So he doesn't, and Sabonis has been a part of one of the 3 best offenses in the league or whatever. The Kings were that high. So if you think it's a top 5, if he is a legit piece to a top 5 offense, then the details don't matter. I think there is a chance that he could be, but I think that he'd need to have the right running mate. And I don't think that running mate is on the team.
Yeah. So what I'll say is, like, I think there are 2 possible tentpole guys, right? And I don't think necessarily at the peak of their powers they fit next to each other, right? And you mentioned, like, I think you know who I'm going to say. It's either Şengün or it's a man,
Right.
right? Like I think those are the 2 guys I look at. I'm like, it's going to be one of you 2, right? Unless one of you develops a jump shot, like I just don't think it's going to fit
Right.
together at the peak of their powers, right?
Right.
And you need that to have a title team. And, you know, it's not to say, like, they don't have time to figure this out. But, I mean, really, we have to start seeing progress in the jumper for either of these guys pretty soon. And so I look at a men and otherworldly athlete, great physical tools. I mean, I think he could, Chuck, like maybe this is ambitious. I think he could be flirting with all defensive teams as soon as next year. Yeah. That's how good he is defensively.
I don't think that's
right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, like that's how good a man striked me defensively last year. Like I was so blown away. Like And I thought I was high on him in the draft, but like he blew me away how good he was defensively. Um, Cam and Jabari, I'm kind of with you. I see them more as complementary talents, right? Like, and with Jalen, you mentioned like he's not reaching that threshold of efficiency to be tentpole, right? There's a way he can pivot and still be on this team, but it involves like real work on his part to become a point guard,
Yeah, but
right? Like I think
it may not be at a price
it's
point that he wants to accept. Like, are you going to pay
right.
him $30 million? Because some team probably would, probably.
Right. But what I'm saying is like if the pathway exists, he's gonna have to. He's not the shooting guard stuff's not gonna last. Like he just can't pigeonhole himself into being a shooting guard. He has to really work on. I mean, he's still too far away as a ball handler. He's making strides in the operating in the pick and roll, but he's still far away. I think the jump shot really. I mean, we're talking like we're on code yellow with the jump shot right now. Like he needs to get to a point where he's consistently like 35-36% from three,
Yeah.
right? Like where that's not even a question every night, right? It's just too streaky,
And
right?
I would say with him, I just don't like. It's not really a reflection on him. Like when in NBA history has a high volume shooting guard like morphed into a point guard, and like in order to survive, like you could say Ant Edwards plays point sometimes, but by his admission, they beat Denver because Mike Conley came back and was healthy and could help like get everything organized. It's just like a different set of skills, and it's hard to just switch from one to the other on the fly. And Ant was already
You have to morph early,
right.
right? Like Jamal Murray's a great example of a guy who like came into the NBA, was really a shooting guard as a prospect, but is like, I'm gonna make the commitment to be a point guard.
Maybe.
Right? He's like,
I think he had more
right,
stuff
like-
than Jalen as a young player. Like more point guardy stuff than Jalen.
More point guard skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I mean you're not wrong. But what I'm saying is like Murray made the commitment to switch early, right? Like it's like I can't survive as a shooting guard in this league, right? Or like thrive at the highest levels, right? Like not to say Murray wouldn't have survived. He just would have been a bench player, right? Like he's not gonna. Jamal Murray probably would not be starting in the NBA if he wasn't a point guard.
But
right?
the secret the secret to Jamal's success is not his point guardiness, although it helps. It's that off the dribble, he can be a really efficient scorer. And Jokic has so much, and Şengün has a lot of it too. But Jokic has so much that he will make you soar as long as once the ball comes to you, Jokic knows that you're a threat to like convert. And Murray was always on that trajectory. He showed signs early that he could be lethal, like scoring buckets quickly. And with Jalen, like I am not going to write it off. I still think the jury's out because I still think even last year his context was not ideal. It's not as though the Rockets had amazing spacing all the time, but it's shakier than I think it ever was with Jamal.
Yeah, I mean, like Jamal was like what 54% true shooting for the first 3 years of his career. It took him a while to get there.
But that was probably
like,
closer to league average at the time, you know?
Sure,
and the league average as a young player is actually pretty impressive. Like, I don't know if Paolo's gotten above league average yet. I think he's, right around there.
No, yeah, league average is climbing every year, which is which is why we're seeing some of the jumps in offensive efficiency that we're seeing. But yeah, I mean, like I make that point to say like it's not me saying I believe he can do it. It's me saying that's the in my opinion, that's the pathway for him to stay on this team and be a high-level starting contributor. And if he's not willing, if he doesn't make that pivot, or at least the organization doesn't put that in his head that he needs to make that pivot and start working towards it soon, it starts getting dicey.
I think so this is in keeping with what we're talking about, but like as a point guard, you are entrusted with the ball, which means that you can operate a bit more slowly because a team is trusting your decision making. If Jalen tries to pivot, that means that he's trying to like up his point guard reps. it means that the pace is going to slow down and the ball is going to be in his hands more and other people's hands less as he develops his decision making. And I just don't know that that's a route the Rockets can really afford to take. To me, I would want his decision making sped up. I would like to simplify his reads. And I want to see him just like dominate at the hoop when he drives, because that's still his most extreme physical gift, is the way he can elevate around the room and contort and find all these different angles. So I want him attacking a spaced paint all of the time. I think he can survive and thrive on the team as, I don't want to quite call it a connector, but maybe as like a third offensive option, as like a really good, like doing it in a different way that Desmond Bane does it. But you know what I mean? Like Desmond Bane's
Michael Porter Jr., whatever, right? Yeah.
Sure, and those guys have better shooting pedigrees than Jalen, but Jalen has a better athletic pedigree. So I think there's a space for him to be that kind of a guy. That's where I would place my chips more than he's going to start running point. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I guess the counter there is like that I would have, like you mentioned how like the ball has to go in his hands. Well, like if he does become like a shooting guard, and like if he stays in the shooting guard position, one, he does have to get to that uber efficient level, and two, like defensively, you do kind of have to morph the team around him, right? Because he's not going to become an elite defender.
You don't think? Well,
right? Like,
maybe not elite. Elite's really hard, but you don't think he could be like a solidly good defender?
I think he can get to average, but I don't know if that's good enough if he's going to be a shooting guard.
I haven't watched enough tape to have an opinion, but I know that the Rockets last year, even with everything, were what, the 13th, 12 or 13 in points.
Oh yeah, he's made strides, to be sure,
yeah.
But he's made strides from worse than the league, right, to like getting not worse than the league, right? Like we need to be very clear about where he started from as a defender and where he is now, right? Like and like. If we're talking like long term, like if we're taking into account where he started from, I just don't think he'll get to that. Like, I mean, like players have done it. I guess Brook Lopez is like prime A example, but Brook Lopez is like huge, right? He's like a massive human being, and extremely smart.
I would
say,
like,
I'm not sure.
But like, look at Kyrie. You know, Kyrie, sometimes his defense is really, really bad, but he's capable of defending quite well. He just did in this last series. And Jalen's a better, like, pure athlete than Kyrie. He'll never be the offensive player Kyrie is. I'm not saying, like, ceiling as a player. But I think that I think that Jalen can be a good defender. Like, I think I'm probably more optimistic than you are on his ability to defend. And I think he could defend ones. Like, he could take opposing very good ball handlers as long as they're, like, under 6'6", and, like, hang with them in time, I think. But that's me.
No, if you think he can get there, then I accept your framing that he could stay shooting guard. He could, like there's a pathway for him on the team like that, right? It does still involve him getting better in a lot of key areas. And I guess that's what next year's all about, right? Like, number one, the jump shot. Number two, the handle, right? Like those two things really need to come around so he can show the promise off the dribble as a pick and roll operator that he needs to be to be an elite scorer in this league, right? Like that's what we're all watching for next year. And I guess we'll see if he can do it. I mean, in the meantime, like I think the Rockets are giving themselves a lot of safety in taking a lot of these other prospects, right? Like Eason, Whitmore, Smith. Right, these are all nice complementary guys who just give you a lot of safety net.
Yeah.
In terms of like, if Jalen's not is not a complimentary star, maybe one of these other guys can do it. Right.
Yeah, I think
that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Man, they're going to be so fun to watch again next year. That's the thing, is they are all so. I don't want to say discombobulated because Ime had them playing well, but like. No one knew what the hierarchy was at the beginning of last year, and they won 40. So, it'll be a fun ride. I look forward to watching them.
Thank you so much for coming on, Chuck. Can you tell the people where we can find you on X/Twitter, where we can read your Substack, where we can listen to your podcast?
Yeah, so it's I don't even know what the Substack actual handle is, but I am chucking darts. Maybe it's Substack.chuckingdarts.com or whatever, substack.com/chuckingdarts, whatever it is. That's
Just
that.
go on Substack and search Chucking Darts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm at Chucking Darts on Twitter. That's where you see most of my work. I thread every episode there. I'm Chucking Darts on YouTube. I put my podcast episodes on YouTube. So just follow me. Thanks so much for having me, Salman.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yep.